Good afternoon, everyone. We've got some of our colleagues joining us. Thank you for your patience and wonderful to have you all here this afternoon. I'm thrilled to invite you all into this space this afternoon to be here with the wonderful Mary Freer. As you know, in 2024, we're embracing the theme of kindness is my superpower, which is highlighting the many ways kindness is demonstrated across New South Wales Health. This week really serves as a reminder to everyone to infuse your interactions with kindness and compassion, ensuring that the delivery of personalised and culturally safe care has kindness at its core. By connecting with both hearts and minds, we can navigate the daily challenges of healthcare with empathy and understanding. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people from the land on which I was born and the Dharawal people whose lands I work and live. I would also extend my acknowledgement to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from across southeastern Sydney Local Health District, from where many of you are joining us today. And I would like to acknowledge the Dharawal, Gadigal, Wongal, Gwagal and Bidjigal people as the traditional custodians of those lands, and welcome those from the many other lands you're joining us from today. I would like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that this is Aboriginal land, always was and always will be. So before we get into the most exciting part of today's session, I really invite you to be in the space, be present, to participate. It is an interactive session. Today's session will be recorded and we can share that with our colleagues who may not have been able to be here with us today to participate. And I encourage you to turn on your cameras so we can see all of your lovely smiling faces. It's beautiful to see those faces beaming back at us. So please join us by sharing that gift with us. So as you know, today we're here to talk about growing compassion for ourselves and others. And in this 1 hour interactive online session, Mary's going to introduce the science and practicality of growing a deeper care and allegiance with ourselves. Mary calls this work micro-solidarity. And as you discover the skill of not turning away from yourself when times are tough and demands are high, you will be able to deepen your understanding of how this transfers to our ability to express compassion for others. You're going to leave this workshop with some new ideas to try and your very own personal self-compassion mantra. That is so exciting. I cannot wait for this. So I would like to provide a very warm welcome to Mary Freer. And for those who don't know or have had the joy of being in Mary's orbit, I'd like to share a little bit about Mary before I hand you over to her for the session. For those who don't know Mary, Mary has contributed to Australia's healthcare system reform in a variety of executive and leadership roles over the last 25 years, and has worked closely with health improvement leaders in many countries across the world to bring about global improvements to our health and social care systems. Mary has held positions with national government and NFP healthcare and social welfare services, including Women's and Community Health Services, Health Direct Australia, the Department of the Premier and Cabinet in South Australia, Aboriginal Affairs, and Reconciliation and Health Workforce Australia. In 2016, Mary was awarded a Westpac Bicentennial Foundation Social Change Fellowship. This has enabled Mary to travel throughout Europe and the US, meeting with leaders who are committed to creating a more compassionate healthcare system. From this, Compassion Revolution was born. Mary has been the executive producer of 5 international Compassion Revolution conferences and has built deep connections with compassion practitioners all over the world. In 2021, Mary published her book, Compassion Revolution, Start Now, Use What You Have, Keep Going. Mary has recently been awarded a Rockefeller Foundation Bellagio Center residency commencing in February 2025 to support her to design a global toolkit for self-compassion. And I'll drop a link in the chat where you can learn a little bit more about Mary. So without any further ado, Mary, it's over to you.
Gosh, I sound really important, don't I? Thank you so much, Dan, for that beautiful welcome and introduction. And I want to reiterate what Dan has said. It's beautiful if you can turn your cameras on. Then I can see your wonderful faces, and we feel like we're actually just a little bit more kind of intimate. We feel like we're in the room together. So we're actually spending time with each other and sharing with each other. I'm really excited about the next hour in this presentation. Before I get started, though, I want to pay my respects to the country that I am on, because I'm in Adelaide today, and so I am sitting on Kaurna country. And so I pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge the deep, deep connection to the land, to the water, and to the skies. Well, it's a kind of full circle moment for me to be doing a presentation for Gathering of Kindness, because I don't know if we have anyone online. I think we've got a couple of people, actually. I saw some names who might have been at the very, very first Gathering of Kindness that was ever held, and that was in 2016. And so Gathering of Kindness was an idea that I dreamt up and invited the wonderful Catherine Crock to join me, and we held a gathering for 100 people in Mount Macedon. And it was actually my partner who came up with the name Gathering of Kindness over dinner one night. So we're both thrilled that Gathering of Kindness has just gone on and grown in strength. And really pay my respects to the beautiful work that Professor Crock has done to keep this idea that started so long ago, keep it going and growing. So at about that time, I decided that what I was more interested in was compassion. And as Dan said, I had just been awarded a Westpac Foundation Bicentennial Award, a Social Change Fellowship. And I wanted to pursue the idea of compassion rather than kindness, because there's a certain muscularity about compassion and what it requires of us. So I'm going to introduce you to some of the ideas that that have been really, really important to me now. Dan, can you see my slide? Just nod. Oh, great. I can see Dan's face, so I know that all is going well. All right. Let me try and move slides. It's working. Before I get into it, and some of these things are going to be really familiar for people who've been so fortunate to have attended a compassion lab across Southeast Sydney Local Health District that is run by an amazing team, and just a big salute to the team that does the compassion labs, that have been trained by us to run compassion labs over there for you. So a couple of these slides will ring a bell. If you've not done a compassion lab with Sue or Susie or the others, now might just be the time for you to think about that. So here we are, we're gathering together, and before we launch into anything, the really beautiful thing is that we only get this one moment to come together and be together. And the Japanese people have a saying, it's ishigo ishii, and it means one time, one encounter. And I always try and remember this every time I meet with people, that we never get to meet each other in this way, to listen to these words, to reflect in the way that we're reflecting. And some of you are meeting actually in teams, in a room together. So that never gets repeated. It's a beautiful thing for us to remember, just how important it is that we pay attention to each time we meet. So as I said, my interest was more around what is compassion. And the simplest definition, so that we're all on the same page, that I can give you is that when I talk about compassion, I mean that it is our awareness to suffering or distress. both the distress that we feel in ourselves. So we all, from time to time, we go through periods in our lives and sometimes in our days, work and personal, and globally at the moment, there's a lot of distress. So it's actually being aware of the suffering or distress that we're experiencing instead of numbing out to it and not knowing that it's there or ignoring that it's there or reaching, for food or numbing out with social media or all the things that we do. Compassion is our awareness to suffering or distress in ourselves and others with a commitment to alleviate or prevent that distress. And that's what makes compassion a verb, that we're committed to alleviating or preventing the distress that we feel and that other people feel. And mostly people ask me a lot, what's the difference between sympathy and compassion, or pity and sympathy, or sympathy and empathy? Or so let me just give you a kind of easy way of understanding that. So pity is actually, we've all experienced other people's pity for us, and it doesn't feel great. It's kind of, I feel really sorry for you. It sucks to be you. Sympathy is a sense of like, I feel for you. It's a sense of feeling sorry and feeling sad for what people are going for. And we'll often say, I feel you or I feel for you. And that's what sympathy is. And sometimes that feels kind of okay in the right circumstance when someone extends condolences, for instance. But often when we're going through hard times, it doesn't feel so great that we're just getting sympathy. And often people over sympathize. So what we're experiencing, we might be coping quite well with it. And other people will over sympathize. Oh, that must be terrible for you. That's what sympathy is. And then empathy is where I feel with you. So now I'm actually starting to feel the things that you're feeling. I'm starting to experience, and a different part of our brain becomes engaged because now we're actually starting to feel the pain that other people are feeling. That's what empathy is. And that's what leads to what we call empathic distress. And compassion is different. Compassion is, I'm here to help. Compassion is, I am aware that you are experiencing distress or I am experiencing distress and I want to alleviate that. Now, there's a writer who wrote a book, his name is Paul Bloom, and he wrote a book called The Case Against Empathy. And he had a really beautiful little way of remembering the difference between empathy and sympathy. And he says, if you feel bad for someone who's bored, that's sympathy. But if you feel bored, that's empathy. If you feel bad for someone who's in pain, that's sympathy. But if you feel their pain, that's empathy. Empathy ignites a particular part of our brain, and it does lead, this continual feeling what other people are feeling can lead to empathic distress. Compassion activates another part of our brain. And that part of our brain is more likely to have a sense of reward. It's more of a social area of our brain that's more likely to have us feeling pro-social, feeling that we can make a difference, that we're not necessarily steeped in the pain that other people are feeling. And we have a little misnomer where we sometimes have this term compassion fatigue. I prefer the term empathic distress. Now, just a quick, so that you know that kindness that you're all practicing and compassion have real impacts. And this is from a piece of research that Professor James Doty did at the Centre for Compassion, Altruism, Research Education at Stanford University, where they did a meta research, a meta literature review. And, they found that all the things that that when we're kind and compassionate, people are more than twice as likely to listen to us, to their clinician around diagnosis and treatment. We know that anesthesiologists who practice care and compassion and kindness, that their patients will heal more quickly. They require less pain relieving medication. And it even helps when we've got just the simple old cold, that sense of knowing that somebody cares about us. And it's really good for you too, the people that work in healthcare organisations, because that kind of work environment is going to really benefit you as caregivers. You're going to feel more engaged, you're going to be less exhausted, your patients feel more satisfied. And even if you're in the back end and you have an administrative role, a leadership role, a auxiliary role in the hospital, whatever it is, you still benefit by the kindness and compassion that's seeping through your organisation. So it makes us a little more resilient to stress. We notice that people feel more psychological kind of engagement. They feel a greater sense of well-being. So it's really, really good for us. And it's really good for patients as well. So you all know this, that, you know, your diagnosis is more accurate. We can actually sit alongside people and just bring them into rhythm with us through our care. We can actually lower people's diastolic blood pressure. And we know that this can happen because we've all been in situations where other people have raised our blood pressure, or we've felt really agitated just by the energy that they're emitting. And then there are other people, we only have to be around them for a little while and we start to feel a lot calmer. So it's good for all of us. So, how do we practice this idea of? I'm going to just step through a few ways that we can practice this care for ourselves and each other. So, just a couple of slides. And then I'm going to get into what does it mean to develop this compassion towards ourselves. And then we're going to learn a little self compassion mantra. And we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of micro solidarity, or having solidarity for ourselves. So, how do we care for ourselves and other people? Debriefing is really important. Finding ways to be able to check in with each other. Very often, people will say, I feel invisible, or I feel that no one notices the work that I'm doing, or when things are really difficult, I'm not sure that other people realise how tricky they are. And so, any opportunity we can have, and it doesn't have to be a formal, lengthy debriefing process, just being able to check in and say, how was that? How was your day? What went well today? Where do you feel you were strong? Where do you feel that you need to build a bit more muscle? They're really good questions for helping people to share and to debrief with each other. Building trust and care is really important in our teams, between our colleagues, and even trust and care for ourselves. And that kind of sounds a little bit funny because it's almost like, you know, I'm more than one person. Well, we are actually. We're a whole lot of things, you know. Often we'll say, on the one hand, I think this, but then on the other hand, I think that, because we're more than just one thing. So building trust and building care, letting people know that we care about them, keeping confidence when we need to, being one of those people that is kind of inoculated against the pleasure of gossip is really, really useful too. I've developed a reputation over the last 10 or so years where I actually find juicy bits of news quite boring. And so people come to me less and less often to tell me things that I don't really want to hear. And it's kind of good to get that reputation that you're not going to get so excited about hearing things that you shouldn't be hearing. So build that trust and care. Create the next things that you're going to do, create them together. So when you're thinking in your teams and amongst your colleagues and with your patients and consumers, what are the next steps that we can make together? What's going to make a difference for you? And how can we do that together? How can we be strong together? Looking after your emotional needs and holding safe space is really important. So, knowing that you, first of all, have emotional needs. And we're so good at numbing to all of that, that I was in a meeting about a year ago and they were setting the context and making it really safe. And I appreciated it, but they were asking people if they had any particular needs. And a number of people who identified as having a disability were explaining what their needs were. And they got to me and they said, Mary, do you have any needs? And without even thinking, I said, oh no, I have no needs. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I thought, what what bravado, what arrogance to even assume for a minute that you have no needs. And so I had to backtrack and just kind of pull myself up. So notice what your needs are and how you can hold safe space and what you need from other people. That's about building a really safe container. So we know this is when I'm available, this is what I'm open to talk about, this is what I'm open to do, and this is how it will feel really good for me. The other is acknowledging really big feelings. We often talk with kids about having big feelings, and we forget that as adults, we have really big feelings too. And so acknowledging that sometimes we need to just tap out. Sometimes we need to step away just for a moment. Sometimes we need to just walk around the block. Sometimes we need our colleagues to just say, "Are you okay? Do you need to just take a beat, take a breath?" Um, what we do is we just squash it down. And then by the time we get home, our shoulders are right up around our ears and our neck is stiff and we feel ourselves kind of trembling. So acknowledging that all sorts of feelings come and go through this beautiful body of ours, and we can kind of bring ourselves back to our body and understand that we're not a walking machine. We're not some flesh covered talking machine. We're actually real people. And that's the good news, not the bad news. So just know when you need to safely tap out and have contingencies around that, because we're not working with machines, we're working with people. And capitalism and patriarchy have taught us to kind of push on and always be thinking about how productive we are. But sometimes just a moment to breathe makes all the difference. And so some tending practices that would be really useful. Make space for yourself. That's like turn things off. Put that phone down sometimes. And I confess that, I've slept with my iPhone. So there you are. I'm out. I've told you. And it's taking the phone to bed. It's the worst thing we can do. So make space for yourself. Turn things off. Have a moment to just be with yourself. And we health workers are one of the most dehydrated profession on the face of the earth. You need to drink more water, you need to breathe, and we all need to rest. And when we get a chance, being out in the more than human world, the natural world, with animals and plants is really, really helpful. These things sound so simple that you might even be thinking, oh goodness, I'm here for an hour to hear things that are so simple. But so many of us are not stopping and breathing. I ran a workshop once and we did a breathing exercise, and a nurse stopped. She was so tense. She said, "I don't have time to breathe." And it was like, suddenly we all kind of heard what she said and she heard what she said. And it was like, oh, how did I get like this? Reflection is really important. And this is going to tie into what it means to be compassionate to yourself, because if we're not kind or compassionate towards ourselves, it's very hard for us to reflect and to notice different patterns in the way we're working and in ourselves. And the reason it's hard is because we're beating ourselves up. So just like we don't want to tell that the person, there's always someone in our life that if everything goes, bad, we don't call them because they're going to make us feel worse. Well, sometimes we can be that person for ourselves, and we don't want to be that. And just being gentle with yourself helps you to develop some self-compassion. Being able to drop the story and to not think that just because you stuffed something up or did something wrong, that you need to beat yourself up. You can actually be really gentle and be really, really accountable. I was sharing with Dan a little while ago that a couple of weeks ago, I had to make a payment to the Australian Taxation Office, as you do when you run small businesses. Well, all of us make payments to the ATO, but I make a PAYG payments, and I did it in a hurry, and I did it on my phone, and I had an amount to pay. And if ever you need to pay money to the ATO, their biller code is 75556, and I actually put that number into the payment box. And so I accidentally paid the taxation office $75,556. And it's a long process to have that returned. And so when you're running a small business and it's pay run and suddenly you've given the ATO 75,000, the invitation to be quite tough on yourself is there. But it taught me so much about drop the story, be accountable, clean up the mess, and don't blame yourself for this. So be gentle with yourselves and each other, because we're doing our best. We really are. And now we're going to move, now that we've set that scene for compassion, we want to move into what does it mean to hold without absorbing? So how can we hold with care and not absorb or minimize someone else's pain? And you get lots of opportunity when people share painful things with you. And I really encourage us to be able to hold space. And this is where compassion makes such a difference, moving beyond empathy. So we can hold. We don't have to absorb. We don't have to lean into the empathy where we start to feel what it is people are feeling. We can just hold and create a safe space. And sometimes I even imagine it as a dish that sits on the table between me and the other person, or something that sits between us. And we can just, it becomes a container for the things that they share with me, a container for the distress they might share, or my distress that I might also have. And it just is able to be held. It doesn't get minimized. We don't make less of it, because there it is in a beautiful dish and it's sitting there, and we can support and reassure, but not be invasive and not ask too many questions, and just creating a nurturing holding practice to show that we're really available for others. That's what self-compassion is going to help you to do. So as I start to explain to you the practice of self-compassion, and then as you start to build your own self-compassion mantra, you'll see that having that actually helps us with other people. Okay, we're going to harness the power of self-compassion. But before we do that, I'm going to just ask if anyone would like to kind of share anything in the chat box around, have you heard something about the difference between compassion, empathy, sympathy, compassion, kindness that's really stood out for you so far? So this is where we're just like a little waterfall. You can just be typing away in the chat box and I'll be noticing it. Is there anything that you've heard that's been helpful so far? Or is there anything new that you've heard that might have you wondering about the difference between developing this really strong sense of compassion for yourself? So you just be thinking about those and dropping them in. Yes, the big feelings can be really overwhelming. Absolutely. So drop those in, folks, and I'll keep an eye on that and I'll have a little look. All right, let me keep going now. Let me just get back to here. Okay, so let's find out a bit about self-compassion. Oh no, let me first of all, sorry, I skipped a slide. I really want to talk to you about micro-solidarity. Okay, so most of the work that has been done globally around self-compassion has been done by Kirsten Neff and Chris Germer, or Germer. And it's very much about they call it self-compassion. It's about developing this relationship with ourselves, like as if we're our own best friend. And I'm going to teach you the ways that they teach self-compassion, because there's so much in it that's really beautiful. But lately I've been thinking, and I'm starting to do a little bit of work, and I'm really looking forward to this month when I'll be in residence in Bellagio, because I'm going to entirely spend my time thinking about what would it look like if we thought about self-compassion as a solidarity with ourselves, or an allegiance with ourselves. That we were able to trust ourselves, and we were able to encourage ourselves, and we were able in many ways to be on our own side. Because very often our sense of imposter, our sense of not being good enough, our sense of self-criticism, our sense of, failure comes from this idea that we're not on our own side. So now we start to kind of go on the other side and develop a story about ourselves that's often not correct. But having an allegiance to ourselves really helps us build a very strong container for what is acceptable and what is not. It really helps us build a kind of strong belief in our gifts and the things that we can share, because we're now on our own team. Just like people in your team, particularly if you're in a leadership role, you really start to get a very good sense of the shape of their gifts and their talents and the things they bring. And we keep a lot of our gifts and talents in exile and leave them out in the cold. And this kind of micro solidarity, these small steps of solidarity where we start being a kind of a whole yes to ourselves, is really going to lead to another way of kind of being with ourselves, caring for ourselves, and dare I say, loving ourselves so that we can love others. So that's the direction that we're going on. So some of my language will really be around this allegiance and solidarity. And if you follow the link to my website, I've got a one-day workshop coming up. I rarely run workshops now, but I have a one-day workshop coming up on micro solidarity. So about self-compassion, there are so many myths about self-compassion. Three of the myths about self-compassion that probably occur to you as you're sitting there is that self-compassion is self-indulgent, it's self-centered. What are you thinking about yourself all the time for? What do you need compassion for? It's also, there's a myth that self-compassion lets me or other people off the hook, and that how will we keep people accountable? And often leaders will say that to me, oh, I agree with compassion, but, how am I going to make sure that the work gets done? Or how am I going to keep people on the hook? So this idea that somehow compassion is going to get in the way of that. So that's another myth. I'm going to bust these myths in a minute with some truths. But a third myth is that practicing self-compassion doesn't lead to motivation or any outcomes or goals being met. So if we're too compassionate with ourselves, like nothing will get done. And I wonder if you have heard of any other myths that are about self-compassion. Be really interested to see you pop those in the chat box as well. That anything else you've heard that's kind of like the story against self-compassion. I'll keep my eye on that. Okay, so let's have a look at the truth. So the truth is that we actually develop its strength. So rather than it being self-indulgent or self-centered, compassion develops strengths that helps us really compassionately engage and work with whatever arises. And I'll often say to people, can we just work with whatever arises, whatever happens in this situation? Are we able to work with that? Whatever happens with the Australian Taxation Office, can we work with that? Can we stay with whatever it is that's coming up? Because we all know that nothing is predictable at all. Another truth is that rather than self-compassion letting me off the hook and that there'll be no accountability, self-compassion actually involves, and I alluded to this a bit earlier, it involves a shift from what I call this fear-based perspective, or the focus on avoiding feelings of discomfort, but rather we can allow them and we can take action to amend them. And one of the ways the easiest way of explaining that is if you've ever done something at work where it hasn't turned out well. So I hope I'm not the only one who's done things that haven't turned out well. I'm hoping there are others here and that I'm among friends, but it just goes pear-shaped, or it doesn't work out, or you have a meeting that you're responsible for and nothing gets through, or you have a meeting with a patient and their family and it just all goes absolutely the wrong way, or you're writing a briefing for the minister and it just, whatever it is, there's a million things that can go wrong, particularly in healthcare. And so often we immediately, because we really can be quite fixated on whose fault it is. Whose fault is this? And we would rather it was our fault than no one's fault. And so if we can't blame anyone else, and normally we'll have a bit of a go at that, we'll say, well, the meeting would have been great if everyone had turned up on time, or that would have worked out if they'd actually read the briefing properly, or it would have worked out if the patient's family understood what was actually, or whatever, we make a story. But sometimes we can just say in an act of self-compassion, what if no one is to blame? And that's kind of one of my favorite sayings. I traveled through Prague a couple of years ago, and my partner, I had a back injury, and so my partner carried my handbag and ducked up to the ATM to take some money out at the Prague railway station. And because he is not used to carrying a handbag, he put it on the floor and never picked it up again. And when he met me at the bottom of the escalators, he had to admit in that moment when I said, "Where's my bag?" He had to admit, "Oh my goodness, I left it at the ATM in a railway station that is known for a high rate of crime and theft." And in that very instant, I heard in my head, what if no one is to blame? And I think it was the difference. It probably saved our marriage. It was the difference between thinking, how could you have done that, to what if no one is to blame? And we just focus on, is it possible that we'll ever find that handbag again? Anyway, the good news was someone handed it in and we had it back within 30 minutes, which is pretty rare. Okay, so that's what happens there. Let me just do the third one. Practicing self-compassion doesn't lead to motivation. Well, actually, it supports a really courageous motivation to be more helpful to ourselves, to work more helpfully with our own distress and with the distress of others. So rather than it not leading to motivation, we think that the way we motivate people is through fear and being tough on ourselves. Come on, we sort of deride ourselves a little bit, talk to ourselves like we wouldn't talk to anyone else, and somehow we think that'll make us more kind of highly motivated. It actually doesn't make us highly motivated. It might actually have us reacting through a great push of adrenaline into our system, and it might have us feeling a bit fearful about consequences, but it is not a sustainable way to create motivation or action. Actually, what helps us is when that voice in our head says, you know what, Mary, you can do this. You've done this before, and I know you're going to be able to do it again, because one of your strong gifts is, and we remind ourselves, and then it's like, you know what, I can do this. Yeah, I'm going to take this on. So there's a lot of science behind self-compassion. It is measurable. It increases our ability to cope during adversity. It definitely does support improved performance. We've seen that, and there's a really great evidence. I've got some reference down there on the bottom of the slide, but really great evidence around how it supports improved performance, even in sporting teams. And it supports learning and this motivated approach after a failure. And very often it's after a failure when we become quite demotivated. But actually, an injection of compassion really has us feeling more motivated. And it's fierce. And tender. It's both things. So sometimes compassion has to say the hard thing to us. Like sometimes compassion says, actually, Mary, the reason the meeting didn't work so well is you were fully unprepared. And rather than feeling shamed or wanting to run as fast as I can from that piece of advice I'm giving myself, I can say, you know what? That's a really helpful thing that I've just noticed. I need to prepare better. So, in that way, compassion can actually be quite fierce. Okay. Do you want to learn a little mantra to fully help you to develop this compassion towards yourself? I can see the people sitting in the room together, so I'm looking right at you. Do you want to develop a little mantra? Nod your little heads. Yes, I see you waving to me. Gorgeous. Okay, here it is. Let's do this. Um, there are three main components of self-compassion that we've learned, right? It's about understanding that your experiences are just the normal part of being human. Whatever you experience, bad days, good days, distress, heartbreak, totally normal part of being human. That's what we signed up for when we came here on earth as a human being. The second component is that being aware of your thoughts and feelings, even if they're really painful, but if you can have a balanced approach and not get really absorbed by them, that is really helpful for self-compassion. And the third is that being non-judgmental and having a non-judgmental understanding towards yourself and being kind to yourself. They are the three main components of self-compassion. And that is how we're going to create our mantra. So I'm going to skip that slide. We can come back to it. So I want you to think for a moment, because you're going to use this to develop your mantra. If you have a piece of paper in front of you, you can be writing your mantra on it. Otherwise, you can use it on the notes thing on your phone or however you want to do it on your computer. But no one is going to ask you what this is. So you're going to think this in your head. You're not going to tell anyone. But just for a moment, I want you to think about whether there's some relatively mild life difficulty that you might be currently experiencing. Something that is maybe causing you to feel uncomfortable. And when you think about it, it causes you some distress, but it doesn't fully impair you. I don't want you to think of something that's really, really like an 8, 9, 10 out of 10. But I want you to think about this life difficulty very quietly to yourself in a level of detail that feels comfortable. Okay, so maybe because this might be a thing that you can use as a practice for your self-compassion mantra. That's why I'm getting you to think of it. I want you to just think of something. It might be something that's not working out at work. It might be something that's causing you a little distress at home. It might be something that maybe you're losing a little bit of sleep over, but it's not fully impairing you. It could be something with the kids. It could be something with your dog. So as you're thinking of that, where do you notice it in your body? Just think for a moment. When you think about that event, that thing that's happening, a conversation, an event, a project, a something, where do you notice it in your body? So if you're in a room with others, just take a moment to just sit quietly, maybe close your eyes or just have a soft downward glance and just think for a moment, where do I feel that in my body? And when you think about that, what sensations do you notice? Do you notice a nervous sensation? Does your mind start racing? Do you feel a little sweaty? Does it just feel like, ugh, not this? Or, oh, God, I wish we could just solve this problem. But just have it in your mind. Now, we're going to create our own self-compassion mantra, and you'll be having that in your mind as a helpful thing. So remember that the three elements of self-compassion, showing up and noticing your own distress, that's the mindfulness part. And then the kindness part is you treat your suffering and yourself with kindness, like you would a friend. And the common humanity part of our mantra is that you remind yourself that there are countless others that are experiencing the same emotion. So many people, it doesn't matter what it is you're experiencing, they may not experience exactly the same set of actions, but that emotion you're experiencing has been felt by others. So we're going to have a mindfulness step, a kindness step, and a common humanity step. So this is how it goes. The first sentence of your mantra is something that just recognizes how this feels. So that thing you're thinking about, you might say, this is a moment of suffering, or this is a moment of distress. Or the line you might have for it is, this hurts. Or even you might have as your first line of your mantra, ouch, or I'm having a hard time, or this is really painful. Any one line in your own words that helps you to recognize, first of all, this is the noticing our distress part of compassion, that helps you notice it. So just one line. So maybe mine will be, if I think of something, this is really hard. And then the second line is the kindness that you're going to give yourself. So the second line of your mantra is, maybe you have something like, may I give myself kindness, or may I give myself the compassion that I need, or may I be gentle on myself. Or sometimes my second line is just, Mary, what do you need right now? So, I think with the ATO example that I gave you, this is really hard. May I be gentle on myself would be a second line. And then your third line in your mantra is someone somewhere is feeling like me, or I'm an imperfect human doing my best. I'm not alone. Everyone feels this way sometimes. Um, and mine, for when I had the ATO thing, the one that quickly came to me is someone somewhere has done this before. I am not the first person who has entered the biller code into the amount box and had to go through. And even if someone hasn't done that, someone somewhere has made a mistake that immediately feels like, I just swallowed a large stone. So you have three lines: the mindfulness line, the kindness line, and the common humanity line. So this is a very small practice that you can remember. So let's take a moment now and we just think for a moment about the issue that you have raised as your example, and you hold that in your mind. And I want you just very quietly to say those three lines. This is really hard. Whatever your lines are, this is really hard. May I be gentle on myself. Someone somewhere is feeling like me. So whatever your three lines are, that you use them. Now, I coach a lot of executives, and I'm telling you, some of them write this down on a little card and they carry it with them and find it really, really helpful. So let's end. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing, and I should be back with you, and I'll know that I'm back because Dan will nod. What is, because I'm happy to take questions, but I would love to know if anyone wants to share their mantra. I would love for people to pop that in the chat, but please don't feel you need to. But you might like to share one word that describes how you're feeling at the end. We're just like 10 minutes out. How are you feeling? So maybe we could get a bit of a waterfall happening, just one word that you're feeling. And then as people are typing those one words, I would love to take some questions. So I don't know if we've been using Q&A. Dan, I don't think there's anything in Q&A. Or if people have questions, I'd love to. And thank you, Mariella, supported. I'm happy to take questions, Dan.
Thanks so much, Mary. And for those online, you can pop your chat or your question into the chat, or we have the Q&A function available also for you. I'm going to be brave and share my mantra.
Oh, beautiful. And look at these beautiful words while you're doing that. I'll read them out: supported, positive, mindful, empowered, relaxed, calm, um, energized. Oh, Dan, relaxed and calm. And Dan, I'm having a hard time. Dan, what do you need right now? I'm doing my best. It's really beautiful, Dan. And, you know, it's so helpful because we all know we have these moments that are really, really hard. And, oh, there's Sue Garcia. Hello. Gorgeous to see you. It's beautiful when you put your cameras on, folks. Yeah, and then we say to ourselves, I'm doing my best. I'm really doing my best. Anyone else want to share? Embraced, compassionate, propped up. Oh, lovely. This is tough, lighter, comfortable, acknowledged, vulnerable, directed. Be kind to yourself. We're all human. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone have a question? Anyone else want to share their mantra?
Can be brave, pop your hand up, take yourself off your mute, pop
Yeah,
it
we
in the
can do that.
chat.
Or anyone just even have a comment to share as we finish out. It's been gorgeous spending time with you. I'll give them a second, Dan.
Mary, what really resonated with me was when you talked about what if there is no one to blame, and flipping that narrative and really using that approach of appreciative inquiry. That can sometimes be really hard to do in situations. I guess I'm interested to hear from you how you keep that at the forefront of your mind to be able to flip that thinking in those moments where you're feeling that pressure or that challenge.
You know, Dan, very often, well, mostly, blame and blaming others is really a discharge of anger. It's a discharge of negative emotion. And we feel it build up and we have to discharge it some way. And the way we discharge it is by lashing out or blaming people. Or even we don't have to do it aggressively. We just say to ourselves, oh, well, you know, it wouldn't have gone wrong if it wasn't for them. But if we can notice, I think the way what helps me is that the more I get to notice what it is that I'm feeling, the more I come home to myself, the more I've become more a friend to myself, an ally to myself. Then I start to notice when I'm dysregulated. I start to notice more quickly. I start to notice when things are pissing me off. And because you notice them a little more quickly, you're not as likely to lash out. And also because it is transformative. Okay, even when there are clinical errors, the immediate jump of whose fault this is isn't going to help us improve the system. And so it applies there, and then it applies in our personal lives, because everyone here knows a million things go wrong, right? There's no clean socks and the kids need to be in the car, and we're like, who didn't do this? Instead of, what if this, what if no one was to blame? What would the solution be then? Um, yeah, and the Prague railway station was such a monumental example of
Mhm.
when the idea of blaming someone, I think my partner had already blamed himself. He looked as white as a ghost, like he'd run over a dog or something. And so for me to hear this so clearly in my head, what if no one is to blame? Changed everything. Maybe that's why the handbag was found so quickly. Who knows?
I was thinking the same, whether it was those positive vibrations
Could have been.
coming
It could have
back.
been. The police said, you'll never find it. Oh, they laughed. And I said, well, we might. Anyway, we did. Um, yeah. Anyone got anything else they'd like to offer? Don't be shy. I'm really happy to hear from you.
Some really lovely reflections.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mary. Oh, thank you. It was so soothing to hear you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
Really been
Janet,
beautiful.
you popped your hand up. Did you have a question?
Oh
Oh,
no, I just had a situation where I mean I didn't know that's what I was doing, but I was actually going, it was nobody's fault. Or and so anyway, I had a friend and we were working out when we could go camping, and anyway, and we talked about which weekends, and anyway, I had a different weekend, she had a different weekend. Oh no, she was right, but it ended up being that I was right, that she had the other weekend, and so we couldn't go camping. But it was just like, I just sort of said to her, oh well, we'll just work out what we can do. Like we didn't look to blame anybody or work out what, whose fault it was. It just happened, and then we're going to work out what we're going to do. She's going to come down and see me, but we can't go away because, so yeah, it was just that it did really change how
yes.
you reacted to the situation. Yeah.
That's a beautiful example, Janet.
Mm.
Yes. Yes. What if we don't waste any time working out whose fault it is, and we just see if we can, yeah, get some clean socks happening for the kids or whatever it is we need, find a camping spot or whatever. Um, Thank you, Glenn. My mantra, I honour my journey with fairness, keep perspective. Each experience is a lesson. Growth comes through kindness toward myself. I learn, I adapt, I laugh. That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. Dan.
Thank you so much, Mary. An absolutely wonderful session with so many incredible takeaways. I love that one time, one encounter, and just how special that sets up the space to be. I think that is really beautiful way of appreciating the moment that we're in. What jumped out to me was when patients are encouraged by their surgeon they heal faster, and they're home sooner. That's incredible. That really demonstrates to me that the real impact and power of kindness, and that ability to hold with care and not absorb, create those vessels between us to hold that in the space, was beautiful. So thank you for sharing those with us today, and taking us through how we develop our own self-compassion mantra. I've got mine written down here, so that will go with me everywhere moving forward. Please join me in thanking Mary for being here today. Use your clappy hands, your love hearts. It's been an absolute privilege to have you in this space, Mary, and there's no time greater than the present where we need to turn that love and kindness inwards, for ourselves. For those who are able to hang around for the next minute or two, I wanted to share with you a calendar of offerings available across the district for the remainder of the week. We've got some loving kindness meditation occurring Thursday and Friday, a number of pop-up events where we can engage in conversation, have some little morsels of kindness, and connect. And at the bottom of the program there, you'll see the statewide program that has been generously offered by our Ministry of Health colleagues, some of which are here today, which is so special. You may or may not have received communication as yet. We have our Kindness is Our Superpower nomination form. We're inviting you to share a little bit about a colleague that has a kindness superpower and how that has impacted you. So you can scan that QR code. You'll also find it on the intranet page, and I will share that in the chat for everyone and in a follow-up email. I would like to invite you to participate in a very short feedback survey around today. It's really important to understand the impact of today on all of you and hear your beautiful reflections. It's been a wonderful session, and I know you'll go forth in the remainder of your day with much love and much light. So again, thank you for gifting yourself this hour, for choosing to spend it with us, and I hope the remainder of your afternoon is special. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.